Americans are becoming less concerned about the war in Ukraine as new research indicates the share of US adults concerned about Russia defeating Ukraine is down 17%. Joining us now is political analyst and the professor at Curtin University, Joe Siracusa. Joe, so what's that come down to? Good morning.
Good morning, Pete. Well, Americans, I think 26% of Americans, according to Pew Research survey, are unconcerned if Russia is triumphant in Ukraine. So they're starting to back down. It's a 16-17% drop in the last several months. So, you know, the public is less concerned about bankrolling Ukraine than the President of the United States. And of course, what this will do, I mean, it's inevitable that Russia will come out and top. I mean, these defeats they're suffering right now are tactical, they're not strategic. One of the debating points we're going to see in the presidential election here is who lost Ukraine, because the fact that the war took place without the United States being able to deter anybody, the fact that Putin has been able to threaten everybody with nuclear weapons. And by the way, Pete, we're about a nanosecond away from a nuclear crisis if Putin decides to hit those distribution points on the Polish border, that is, take out American military stuff before it gets to Ukraine. So we're very, very close. And of course, in the United States, there's concern about the inflation, the economy, and you'd be interested to know this, Pete. Most of the research in the United States about who's going to win in the midterms, of course, is dictated by who's paid for it. The Democratic outfits have said that it's going to be a close race. The Republican pollsters say it's not going to be close at all. But I'll tell you this, given what's going on right now and the president's continuing failure to secure support, these 54% do not believe in his performance, 58% don't think he's done much. I think Donald Trump could beat Joe Biden from a jail cell in 2024 because there's just no way for Biden to go on this. As I say, the war's going backward, the economy's going backward. And what really disturbed me was a report I heard last night on Reuters that something like 34% of Americans are now suffering food security, which means they can't get enough food. 9 million children are not getting enough food each day, and 1 in 5 households is trying to figure out where the next meal is coming from. So you can see where that report, that support for Ukraine is backing up a little bit.
Well, I mean, people, and this always happens, doesn't it, Joe? People get fatigue when it comes to war, particularly, as you quite rightly point out, there are cost pressures at home.
Oh, yeah. You know, by the time we finished the Vietnam War, Pete, it was 10, 11 years, American governments were voting for anybody who would get out of Vietnam. I mean, it's not about getting in, it's getting out. And of course, Joe Biden doesn't realize that if he wants to get tough on Ukraine, he wants to get tough with the Russians, he wants to get tough with the Syrians or the Iranians, there's nothing in it for him. You know, the George H.W. Bush did a terrific job returning Kuwait to sovereignty and didn't win him an election. And of course, famously, Winston Churchill was turfed out of office after he defeated Nazi Germany and saved the British from a Nazi invasion. So there's not much loyalty that translates into electoral success in terms of foreign policy. It's all about domestic policy, I think.
So a couple of quick ones here before we run out of time, Joe. Why do you think it is inevitable that Russia will win? Because people have, as we know, underestimated the fight in Ukrainian soldiers.
Well, let's put it this way. They don't technically win. That is, if you don't see a flag everywhere, they're not going to lose. I mean, they're too big.
Yeah.
They're too ugly and they're too mean right now. And they could do too much with these power plants, et cetera. I mean, they can't lose. I mean, the question Americans are going to have is why weren't we able to deter Vladimir Putin in the first place? That's what the debate's going to be all about.
And why? What's the answer to that?
Well, the answer is because he's a nuclear power and that he wanted to talk about advanced weapon systems on his border. He wanted to talk about neutrality, and because we would not pay attention to him, he then went crazy and started sending troops in and saying all kinds of things. You know, I got a kick, Pete, out of his speech in Red Square the other day. He was talking about Satanism in America and about the failure of Christian governments. I mean, he sounded like a 9th century European king talking about the heathens across the river. I mean, he's reverted back to his historical playbook. And of course, when I say Russia's going to win. And what I'm saying is that Ukraine is not going to be the same as it was. And, once you break up a place like Ukraine, the way they have since Crimea 2014, you're never going to put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Yeah, I mean, and you've got the sections of Ukraine now that Russia is claiming as its own. I suppose if Putin is backed into a corner, everybody assumes that he's going to press the nuclear button. What does Biden do then?
Nothing really, because Biden can't go on to World War III because Putin is using nuclear artillery or shells in Ukraine that have a radius of about 2 miles. He can't go that far, but he could create a greater problem if Putin or some of his troops and the theater commanders there have control. If they attack a distribution point in a NATO country, and then we might be called into it. Now, I think the chances of war between Putin and Biden are about 10% if given their own ability to do so. I think the chances of an accidental war right now are about 90% because there are no guardrails anywhere, and theater commanders can do what they want. And an artillery shell, there are over 2,000 of these small nuclear weapons, can be used at any time because that is why they were designed.